Long-term care homes have died from COVID-19. Tonight, what we've learned about inspections that were not being done in person.
No proper inspection can be done when you're not seeing what's going on in the facilities.
Nearly a third of Ontario's long-term care facilities have had COVID-19 outbreaks, resulting in the deaths of over 1,000 residents. Some of the hardest hit homes are right here in the GTA. Orchard Villa in Durham has lost 68 residents. Altamont Care Community in Toronto has seen 46 residents die. At Camilla Care in Peel, 43 residents have died, and in the Ina Grafton Gage home in Toronto, they have seen 21 residents die from COVID-19. Tonight, CBC News has learned troubling new information about the inspections of 2 long-term care homes, including the Ina Grafton home. After receiving complaints about safety and infection control, government inspectors investigated the facilities without setting foot inside. Instead, the investigations were done over the phone. John Lancaster now with this exclusive story.
For weeks, healthcare workers at the Ina Grafton Gage home in the city's East End have complained about their safety and the safety of residents.
You always have to phone and says, I'm running out of gowns, masks, and these masks, they don't stay on properly. I mean, we need something that's going to hold and cover our nose and mouth. Half the time you're talking to somebody and next thing you know, it's down below your nose.
So far, COVID-19 has killed 21 residents of the long-term care home. 29 more are infected, and so are 26 staff.
A lot of the time, completely understaffed. Our workload has tripled with all of the sick residents, often not enough PPE.
CBC News has learned the province investigated those concerns last month, twice, both times over the phone, interviewing managers and logging staff complaints. Inspectors never set foot in the home before determining everything was fine. Today, Ontario's Minister of Health defended these over-the-phone investigations.
This was done because of the significant concern about anyone coming in from the outside in order to minimize the possibility of transmission of the COVID-19 virus.
The union representing the care workers isn't buying it. It's filed an emergency application to the Labour Relations Board demanding, among other things, a full boots-on-the-ground inspection.
But nobody is coming on site. They're done on the phone, and no proper inspection can be done when you're not seeing what's going on in the facilities.
Last month at Anson Place in Hagersville, another ministry phone inspection concluded everything was fine. 27 residents at the home have died of COVID-19, and the Labour Relations Board ordered inspectors to actually make an in-person visit. That's when they issued 8 notices of safety violations.
To physically have to be there.
But that's not happening much, says SCUI President Charlene Stewart. She says the province has slashed the number of care home inspectors before the pandemic. Back at Ina Grafton Gage, staff are asking the Labour Board to order a full in-person inspection. The corporation that manages the facility says that's not necessary. It says staff are all well equipped and the 2 phone inspections are proof all is fine. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
The province has unveiled its framework for how it plans to restart elective surgeries in the province. It will be up to individual health regions and hospitals to assess their needs and meet certain criteria. But there are no concrete timelines to that plan. And as Farah Morelli tells us, those on hold for a procedure will likely have to wait a lot longer.
Sometimes I can get up of my bed because the pain is really horrible.
For Laura Bolanos Cardenas, the past few months have been unbearable. She has ovarian cysts. The pain so harsh at times, she's been prescribed opioids.
Right now, the pain is awful. So I have my pills here.
Last month, she learned her MRI and the procedure to have the cyst removed are on hold because of COVID-19.
She's kind of in a limbo.
All procedures deemed not immediately life-threatening have been on hold since mid-March to make space for a surge in COVID-19 patients.
We're giving every hospital the ability to plan around their own unique situation.
Today, the government announced a framework that'll allow individual hospitals to start up procedures. They'll need to meet certain criteria, like capacity for acute care and PPE stock.
We know that there are tens of thousands of other surgeries that have been postponed, and we want to start moving as quickly as possible.
But the government wouldn't say when they'll actually start moving.
I would say it's going to be several weeks before we're able to get to that.
We did 50,000 fewer operations than we would normally have done.
Those on the front lines are welcoming the plan, but say the backlog once things do start up again will still be huge.
We're going to have this huge demand for surgery, but for the foreseeable future, it's not likely that we're going to be able to provide surgery at levels close to what we're normally able to do.
The domino effect of that, families like these will likely have to wait much longer.
My case is not, it's not urgent right now, and I understand that.
At the same time, you would like to have a plan or at least an idea on when this could happen.
Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
They promised a massive smart city on what is now largely undeveloped waterfront land, a city that would generate thousands of jobs and billions in tax revenues. But tonight, Sidewalk Labs' Quayside project is no more. Lauren Pelly joins us live from Sidewalk Labs headquarters on Lakeshore East. And Lauren, a pretty stunning reversal here. What happened?
Yes, it really was. Well, this is the Sidewalk Labs office right behind me. Like many offices in the city, it's empty right now, and it could be staying empty for quite some time, along with this whole plot of land, after the company decided to pull the plug on a project that was years in the making. This was the vision for Sidewalk Labs' high-tech neighborhood on Toronto's waterfront. Sustainable timber buildings, underground waste disposal, and new affordable housing. 3 years ago, it was unveiled to fanfare. Today, the company's CEO announced the project is scrapped, citing unprecedented economic uncertainty. It's a move that comes after years of consultation and planning. Sidewalk Labs said the project could bring in billions and create thousands of jobs over the next 2 decades, all while transforming this chunk of the eastern waterfront. But the proposal was also mired in controversy. Plans for widespread data collection prompted major privacy concerns.
In a smart city, people don't have a chance to consent or revoke consent to the collection of their data.
There was so much opposition in Toronto. They must have known that they would not be welcome here, that they would have a struggle to get any kind of public approval and participation.
So what's next for this 5-hectare waterfront site?
Since we own this very attractive piece of land and have a new opportunity now to start over, as it were, and to address all of these concerns, we've learned what some of them are.
I look at it now, there's an opportunity for other people to do something spectacular.
But time and money went into the Quayside project. Waterfront Toronto board member Joe Cressy says those efforts won't go to waste.
We spent 2 years developing a vision for a 21st century neighborhood. That foundational work has been done, and we will build upon that as we look to start again with a new partner in Quayside.
So it could be quite some time before we see what new partner signs on for this site and what this would look like. Will we see more development out here, such as condos, affordable housing? All of that will take time to play out, and it could be quite a while because Ontario is still in a state of emergency for this pandemic. Dwight?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Lauren. With some of the city's favorite green spaces closed because of the pandemic, advocates are calling for them to be opened up, allowing people to get outside while also practicing physical distancing. Lisa Shing is live outside Ontario Place right now. And Lisa, some differing opinions on this.
There's first the mindset that closing up spaces, Dwight, will keep people safe. And then the other, which is as we start to open, we need more space so that people can distance safely. Here at Ontario Place, it's currently closed, as are all provincial outdoor amenities right now. And so is another city park, and that's upset some people here. At Toronto's High Park, signs and fences are up, and police officers are at every entrance, a way for the city to stop droves of people from admiring the annual cherry blossoms, a tradition for Jane Hodgson, but not this year.
Every year for the last 40 years, since I was born, I've run through the cherry blossoms for my birthday. I'm glad to keep the rules, I have to say. It's nothing, is it?
If we have to do this for 10 days, it's a small sacrifice.
Others think the city went a bit too far.
We'd like to walk in the park, especially Bill. He needs his steps.
I understand the cherry blossom area, and maybe they patrol that area to keep people separated. But if somebody's jogging on their own or walking their dog or with their family, I don't see any reason why they can't go out into a public space.
That's the case in Trinity Bellwoods, where just the cherry blossoms are fenced off. And while most of Toronto's parks are open except for the amenities, another big green space, Ontario Place, is also fenced off. That seems to have driven many to the nearby lakefront trail, causing crowding there, especially on warm, sunny days.
It has an unintended impact that is incredibly detrimental.
The city's former chief planner says funneling people into smaller spaces jeopardizes public safety.
If the goal is safety and the goal is public health, and if we recognize that being outside is not a bad thing, it's a good thing, then we need more space outside, not less.
We need to think about how we promote activity within our city while at the same time promoting physical distancing as part of our efforts to live safely as a community with COVID-19 in our midst.
Now, this is especially the case, as Eileen de Villa has said and admitted, that the risk of transmission is lower outside rather than inside. Now, the criticism comes as the city has announced it's opening more streets to cyclists as well as pedestrians. As for Ontario Place here, it's owned by the province, as I said, so that's up to the provincial command table as to when they ease restrictions. Dwight?
Lisa, thank you. Mount Pleasant Group of Cemeteries is reopening to the public. Its properties have been closed since last month after people visiting the grounds were not following physical distancing guidelines. The properties, including those connected to the Beltline and Mount Pleasant Cemetery, will reopen May 17th. For many families, Mother's Day this weekend will be one of the greatest tests of the COVID-19 physical distancing rules. In other places in Canada, authorities are starting to allow people to double the so-called bubble they've been living in and quarantine with another family. Chris Glover looks at why that isn't happening here just yet.
At the beginning of the COVID quarantine, Haley Chandler was cat-sitting for her best friend.
I'm actually bubbled already.
Even though they don't live together, they've been together throughout. But she suspects others are starting to break physical distancing restrictions.
I don't think everyone's following the rules as nicely as they were before because I feel like the scare has gone down a bit.
Guess who's here?
That pent-up excitement to hug loved ones
Give me a hug.
is likely even more unbearable when Ontarians watch videos from other provinces where people have been allowed to double their quarantine bubble to another household.
Assuming, of course, both households agree. The selection is not interchangeable.
A lot of people might be asking themselves, why not here in Ontario? What would you say to them?
First of all, we have a different situation in Ontario.
This epidemiologist says the severity of our outbreak and the rate of people still testing positive are just some of the reasons. Instead of bubbles, Ontario is expanding some business activity.
You can control the economic opening of businesses a bit more easily. We can close them again if need be. Whereas when the bubbling begins, you've officially contaminated, for lack of a better word, more families.
Doubling bubbles also improves your odds of getting childcare. Nancy McIntyre has been looking after her grandson since the beginning, but lots of her family and friends are still at a distance.
Yeah, it would be very difficult. I mean, which one do you pick exactly?
In Newfoundland, videos quickly surfaced poking fun at what would happen if you wanted to double bubble with someone who wasn't interested.
You must be able to trust that the other family has the same level of rigor in terms of hygiene and isolation that you do.
Many infectious disease experts say a version of bubbling is likely coming to Ontario, but not in time for Mother's Day.
I think families have enough common sense. They know the health of their parent. I'm gonna leave it up to the families.
It would be a shame for us to make all this progress and have to go backwards again.
Hopefully that hard truth doesn't burst your bubble. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette, mine is out in Durham. I think yours is out in Kingston, so virtual
right.
hugs.
That's what
For
we'll be
Mom this
doing.
weekend, yeah.
A little physical distance visit. Yep. Best we can do. You know, Dwight, sometimes you have a party and there's that one guest that shows up that wasn't necessarily invited.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what we're looking at with our weather conditions here. This Arctic air mass, right, showing up, and I don't think anybody invited this one. And really coming in for tomorrow, but especially tomorrow night into Saturday morning. That's going to be when that core of coldest air kind of gets here. If you look up here at the contour in terms of the colors, green and into the blue, that's kind of your freezing line, right? And you can see those colors sinking very far deep south of the Great Lakes. So that's in place into Saturday. Guess what? By the time we get to Mom on Sunday, we're going to see it retreating. And so that's a good thing. Couple of days that it is here, though, we're going to have to deal with those temperatures well below seasonal. And we may have some record overnight lows as well, some new records. Now, your advisory for tonight, yes, frost again, similar areas as we're talking about Hamilton, Niagara, back towards Chatham, Kent, and up towards Sarnia and along the northern shore of Lake Erie. Our showers from earlier have moved off to the east, and you could see how around lunch we were at 12. Showers came in, temperatures dropped off, and then the sun came back out and the temperatures went back up a little bit, but we're not doing quite what we should be doing. Let me just put it like that. Another 10 degrees we should have on top of what tomorrow afternoon's high is of 6 degrees after an overnight low tonight down to freezing, Dwight.
Oh boy, thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
The weather update is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. Take advantage of special offers now. It's hard to stop a Trane.
With the Victoria Day long weekend quickly approaching, Premier Doug Ford says seasonal residents should practice caution when traveling to cottage communities.
When you go up north, if you want to check on your plumbing at your cottage or heat and seeing what's going on up there, this isn't going to be the typical May the 24th weekend. I'm asking you, please, don't bring a whole whack of people up. It's not the party weekend that's been in the past. You know, go up there, check things out. Try to bring your own supplies up there.
The Premier had a discussion with cottage country mayors about the impact of COVID-19. While the Premier had previously told seasonal residents to stay away, he's now asking cottage owners to practice the same public health measure they would at home. That includes no public gatherings, avoiding non-essential travel, and continuing to practice physical distancing. The Premier is also asking tourists to hold off traveling to the regions until it is safe to do so. Spring flooding over the past few years has cut back on opportunities to visit the Toronto Islands. Now the islands are facing a 1-2 punch from both high water and COVID-19. Alicia Son has more.
Typically at this time of year, you guys have your eye on the water line.
Every day we have the island. This has become the new normal.
It has been a tough 3 years on the island. In 2017, it was shuttered to the public, losing millions in infrastructure damage, let alone tourism, after being devastated by what was thought to be a once-in-25-year flood.
When it came back in 19, that was really discouraging.
Flash forward to now. Water levels for 2020 are approaching Lake Ontario's record high from last year, and the island is closed to the public yet again.
The yacht clubs haven't been able to open, and they've hit both the RCYC and the QC are very vulnerable to flood damage, and they haven't been able to bring their people over to help do work to protect them.
The island is closed to prevent the spread of COVID-19. There's no word on when tourists can return, making business owners worry about weathering this storm.
I heard that they weren't going to let people on the island until August from someone.
Jason Demeline opened the Riviera 3 years ago.
Gosh, it hasn't been an easy 3 years on the island, has it?
The first year was fantastic. I mean, obviously last year dealing with the flood issues, and then this year with the probability of a flood, and then now the pandemic. I mean, you know, you just and also being a seasonal place where we're not open the whole year round, it's a little tougher on us. I think at best it's probably going to be the end of June, to be honest. Obviously at a reduced capacity. Lucky for us over here, we have a big back patio where we can do physical spacing. It will be a challenge moving forward, but I mean, you know, like I said, you got to roll with the punches.
I'm really hearing that same resiliency among the islanders that I've encountered in covering all of the issues that happen on.
It's a special community over here.
The island could be soggy and it could be busy again, but no word on when. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up next, the incredible story of how this baby was brought into the world.
The second we pulled into the parking lot, and I'm like, okay, this baby's coming whether we like it or not right now.
You won't want to miss this one. We're back in just a few minutes. The heroism of healthcare workers continues to be celebrated around the world and in this province. This week, Carla Bell was on her way in for her shift in Orangeville when the nurse heard a call for help. But it wasn't a COVID-19 related call, and she arrived just in time. Nali Kalata picks up the story.
I did have tears in my eyes, and I just wanted to be there to keep the parents calm because that's what they needed at that time.
Carla Bell was waiting outside Headwaters Healthcare Center to be screened before her shift when a car screeched to a stop in front of the hospital doors and she heard cries for help.
I just kind of threw off my coat, put some gloves on, took a deep breath, and just ran up to the car.
In the passenger seat, Stephanie Sant was in labor.
The second we pulled into the parking lot, I had the sensation to push the baby out, right? And I'm like, okay, this baby's coming whether we like it or not.
Her husband, Jeff, jumped out of the car, running with Belle to her side.
So he literally, from the moment that he got out of his seat and ran around to the front of the car, he grabbed her. Literally, I was pushing her out and he got her by the shoulders. He was able to pull her right out and hold her. The first words out of his mouth is, "It's a girl." He looks at me and I'm like, oh my goodness. And once we heard her cry, everybody kind of had a sigh of relief.
Belle wrapped the baby in a jacket to keep warm. Mom, Dad, and baby were rushed inside, a highlight of Belle's 35-year career.
It's nice to have a bit of happiness in the world, something to forget about what's going on.
Molly Van Noort was born at 6 pounds 11 ounces, healthy and safe. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
We are calling on the federal government to fund transit on an urgent basis.
After the break, as ridership and revenues plummet, there are calls to help transit systems like the TTC stay moving. Details next. The Prime Minister announced a new multi-billion-dollar deal with the provinces today to top up wages of critical workers during this pandemic.
We're relying on these workers now more than ever, and we will be there to support them. It will be up to each province and territory to determine who exactly qualifies for this wage increase, but the bottom line is this. If you're risking your health to keep this country moving and you're making minimum wage, you deserve a raise.
Justin Trudeau said details of the $4 billion pay raise agreement are still being finalized. He also said in the months and years to come, Canada will need to reflect on how we treat the low-wage frontline workers who keep our society running. With more people working from home, there's fewer people taking public transit, and that means the TTC is suffering. Ridership is about at 15% of what it was pre-COVID. Now, many are calling on the federal government to provide emergency funding for a sector deemed an essential service. Nellie Nanowski now with the details.
Right now, we're experiencing a ridership drop of about 85%, just like the airlines, and they're receiving funding to close that gap, and transit is not.
The head of the Canadian Urban Transit Association wants to know why that is. Today he stood on Queen Street in front of a now quiet bus shelter, saying public transportation is more important than ever.
We are calling on the federal government to fund transit on an urgent basis to ensure that we can provide enough level of service so that the frontline workers during this pandemic are able to get to and from home safely.
Over the coming weeks, the TTC plans to temporarily lay off more than 1,000 workers. And riders are already waiting a little bit longer between cars. But experts say that's not enough to balance costs.
What they have is a significant decline in fare box revenue, still operating at a reasonable frequency, so incurring all the costs. And there's a gap now. And the gap has to be filled one way or another. The prudent, right way to do it is the way we bail out airlines.
Those that don't have access to a car, they're not going to fly to the grocery store, right? They're going to take transit to the grocery store. And so why is it that the government seems to be more inclined to be bailing out airlines than something that people use on a daily basis?
Restarting is much more painful than keeping it operating. So there's merit in it. I honestly believe that the governments will come to the rescue.
Mayor John Tory says staff have been crunching the numbers and cities need $10 billion in emergency funding, especially those with large transit systems.
It's a major and very important challenge for our success as cities, but also for our recovery as a country.
When asked about transit, the Prime Minister says that he has been talking to premiers about the issue and will bring it up again today. But he maintains that funding for municipalities goes through the province and that transit isn't a federal issue. Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Toronto.
It is not just public transit being impacted. Greyhound says the loss of fares during the pandemic is forcing them to temporarily idle their buses. Greyhound Canada will halt all of its bus routes in Canada as of May 13th. The company says the pandemic has caused ridership to drop 95%. Some of the affected routes include London to Toronto, Toronto to Ottawa, and Kitchener to Toronto. About 400 employees will be temporarily laid off. Greyhound says there has been a lack of financial support from both the federal and provincial governments. Hey, Colette, we're still here waiting for spring to arrive.
I know. I am waiting along with everybody else. You know, it was so tough because we had such a great March. And then there was April, and now May is looking like we're going to have to get halfway into it before things really improve. But it's the next couple of days that are going to be some of the coolest. And for tonight, frost advisory with some of our temperatures again dipping below freezing. So around Niagara up to Hamilton, along the north shore of Lake Erie, as I've been pointing out, and from Chatham-Kent up towards Sarnia, where you have those frost advisories for some of those tender crops that are in place there. Now, our almanac, I'm pointing this out, 17 degrees, just about, is where we should be. 5 for an overnight low, and there's certain things I like to change over as we get towards spring, getting closer to summer. So, for example, I take the record snow off and I put rain in, 26 millimeters in 2010. But on this day in 1976, there was actually a couple of centimeters of snow that fell, 2.3. So it is possible, and I'm going to show you an area that may see a little accumulation as we're heading into the weekend. I know you may not want to see it, but I'm going to show it to you here in a moment. Current temperature is 10 degrees. Oshawa, a little cooler there at 8 degrees, and we're seeing that flow coming in from the north to northwest. Those cooler winds, they're a little bit gusty at times. They'll let up somewhat overnight, but still, it's going to feel pretty chilly. We've seeing those showers moving well off to the east. We're getting into this clearing trend overnight tonight, and that, again, kind of lends towards these temperatures falling off. But Friday, especially as we go into the latter part of the day, the risk of seeing some wet flurries or a little bit of a light mix coming into the GTA, and then with some strong winds across the lake as we go into Saturday morning, we are going to see some lake effect here. And so because of that, in some areas like around Mount Forest, some of the higher elevations through here, 5 centimeters could be a couple of spots that locally get even closer to 10. We'll see a trace. That's about it. I know it says 1 centimeter, a trace maybe into the GTA. So patchy frost around tonight, those temperatures dipping to freezing or just below. We don't warm up much. These are closer. Remember the average low for this time of year? Yeah, our highs tomorrow are going to be closer to that. We're seeing kind of those mixed conditions around the area. Saturday still a little breezy, certainly still cool. Watch out Saturday morning. That's going to be some of the chilliest. And then for Mother's Day, Dwight, I'm very happy to leave you on this note that things will warm up again.
At least Mom is getting some double digits. Thank you, Colette.
And she deserves it. You're welcome.
Yes, she does. And a lot more, too. We got a better picture today of what members of the Canadian Armed Forces are actually doing at long-term care facilities. Julie Van Duzen looks at the latest mission for our military.
COVID-19 has hit long-term care homes hard, accounting for about 80% of the deaths in Canada. Many facilities are understaffed, often described as a war zone, as those on the front lines fight to keep the virus contained. Soldiers are already deployed in 13 long-term care facilities in Quebec, but that will soon jump to 25 in the coming weeks, with 1,350 Canadian Forces personnel in place. In Ontario, 265 medical and support personnel are assisting in 5 facilities across the Greater Toronto area. It's an unusual humanitarian mission.
Our Canadian Armed Forces members have moved very quickly, figured out the training, done something that they have never done before because that's exactly what was needed for our elderly.
Almost all uniformed medical personnel are working in long-term care homes. They're supported by soldiers who have been given about 5 days of training to learn their new duties.
Moving equipment, helping with logistics on the inside, cleaning and food service. Duties not associated with the intimate medical care of an individual.
COVID-19 has also put a focus on the low pay of those who work in long-term care. Many shuttle between homes to try to make ends meet. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that Ottawa will invest $3 billion, the province's $1 billion, to top up the wages of essential workers who earn under $2,500 a month. Some provinces have already pledged a top-up for their long-term care workers.
We're relying on these workers now more than ever, and we will be there to support them.
COVID-19 has exposed chronic problems in many seniors' homes. The Prime Minister says sending in soldiers is not a long-term solution. But for the provinces, it buys time as they try to come up with a plan to deal with the crisis. Julie Van Duzen, CBC News, Ottawa.
There is concern that the U.S. President, Donald Trump, could have been exposed to the coronavirus after the White House announced one of his personal valets has tested positive.
A little bit strange, but it's one of those things. I've had very little personal contact with this gentleman. Know who he is, good person, but I've had very little contact.
The staff member works in the West Wing and serves the president his meal, among other duties. Since the White House medical unit was made aware of this case, both Trump and Vice President Mike Pence have since tested negative for the virus. It is not known when this staff member developed symptoms or when Trump was exposed to this person. Yet more grim economic news today from the U.S. Dismal new unemployment numbers show the coronavirus pandemic is still taking a heavy toll on American businesses and workers. Lindsay Duncombe now with the details from Washington.
These are staggering numbers for the U.S. economy. In the past week, 3.2 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits. If we look at what's happened in the past several weeks since the U.S. economy shut down in March, there are more than 33 million Americans looking for work. And tomorrow, we're going to get a bigger picture, the context of what that means when the Bureau of Labor Statistics jobs report comes out. The estimates are that the current U.S. unemployment rate for April is 16%. Now, what is more shocking than that high number, or equally as shocking, is the contrast, because before the pandemic hit, unemployment in this country was at historic lows. So this is such a dramatic economic U-turn, and that's what makes it so difficult for economists to predict how long this unemployment will persist. Will the economy rebound as states open up and people go back to work, or will people remain out of work for a longer period of time? There is so much uncertainty here. If we want to look, though, for silver linings, these weekly numbers that came out today are nowhere near the high of the weekly number that we saw at the end of March. So while the number still is growing, it is not growing as much as it has been in previous weeks. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
In the U.S. and, of course, here in Canada, how and where we work has changed since the start of this pandemic. And as we move towards reopening, those changes are far from over. Aaron Salzman looks at some of the ways workplaces will have to adapt to keep employees safe.
To get a sense of what Canada's workplaces may look like, look to other countries ahead of the curve, like Italy, where they've installed traffic lights for washrooms. Green means go, literally. They've already passed temperature checks to get into the building. Once inside, a smartphone app monitors if they're within 1.5 meters of someone else for more than 15 seconds. It's not a tool to spy on us, this worker says. It may be a little less Big Brother in Canada, but experts say workplaces here will also see big changes.
We started the 6 Feet Office project.
This global real estate firm is suggesting one-way hallways, desks with plexiglass dividers, workers using disposable pads to limit hard surface contact and allow for easier cleaning. Shared areas like lounge space may need to be booked in advance. Elevators will be limited to just a few people per ride, which could mean long queues in high-rise towers. But that would be mitigated by a gradual return to work, starting with perhaps 2 or 3 days a week in the office, and alternating those days between co-workers.
Many of these measures could stay in place until there's a viable vaccine or a treatment. That could mean working from home in some form or another for months or possibly even years. For some, the change could even be permanent.
A lot of companies are now seeing that it is possible to still be efficient while a lot of their employees are not in the office.
That could have an effect on commercial property values.
If that's 20 or 30% of the population working from home, certainly that will soften demand on real estate.
But even with fewer people inside, she says, offices will likely need more space to keep people separate. Either way, return to work may never truly be return to normal. Aaron Saltzman, CBC News, Toronto.
And it's not just businesses who are trying to figure out how to restart after being in lockdown. Employees in all sectors are wondering right now how they are to return to their workplaces safely. Health reporter Christine Birak looks at the anxiety some are already feeling at just the thought of going back.
Ellen Schultz feels cut off from her family. She's tired of living in a bubble. But like many dental hygienists, she's also worried about going back to work.
Some nights I can't fall asleep and I'll wake up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning thinking about it. It seems the closer I get, the more anxious I get.
A recent survey found a quarter of Canadians want to return to their regular work schedule. The rest prefer to work from home more often or only go into work when needed.
I think it's probably majority of us, if not all of us, have a certain degree of worry or anxiety.
Doctors say most of us have the same questions. Is it safe to go back to work? Does my employer have the right protocols and equipment to keep me safe? And could going into work end up affecting my loved ones?
I think it's important to open up those discussions, normalize those reactions, and say, let's hear about those concerns.
I can't find any masks anywhere.
Esthetician Catherine Hay runs her own business. She can stagger appointments, but treatments are often face-to-face. She's not sure how to manage the risk of asymptomatic spread.
I'm really hoping to get some guidelines from some experts on what to do.
The question I think at this moment is, what is acceptable risk here? And I think that goalpost is shifting.
Is that all right? Leading experts say employees can do a basic risk calculation based on their age and underlying health conditions. But it's up to public health officials to figure out how to keep society safe.
Guidance that comes centrally from essentially from the government that is entrusted with the public good is where we should be.
The dental office where Schultz works has an infection control plan, but she'd sleep better knowing she doesn't have to go back until all public health officials agree that it's safe. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, how your messages on one of the world's most popular apps may be used to help censorship in China.
To the extent that you're using this application, you're also essentially providing free labor for the refinement of a machine of digital repression inside China.
We look at the University of Toronto research into WeChat next. It is one of the world's most popular apps with roughly 1 billion users. But new research from the U of T suggests WeChat may be using your data to broaden censorship in China. Katie Nicholson explains.
It's no big surprise that WeChat monitors its users in China and even censors some of the material that they share. What is surprising, according to new research from the University of Toronto's Citizen Lab, is that WeChat is also monitoring what users outside of China are up to.
When I initially did this experiment, I thought I was going to find that international users were not subject to the same kind of surveillance that Chinese users were, because they weren't subject to the same censorship. So, when I found that they were, that came to a great shock. That was a great shock to me.
Citizen Lab determined that content shared by international users that might be considered controversial in China was quickly flagged and then censored among WeChat users in China. After repeated requests, WeChat's parent company, Tencent, told CBC News it didn't have anyone available for comment. Now, social networking apps routinely monitor content to improve user experience or target ads, but Citizen Lab says this is different.
To the extent that you're using this application, you're also essentially providing free labor for the refinement of a machine of digital repression inside China.
The Ontario and BC Privacy Commissioners declined comment, so did the Federal Privacy Commissioner. But former Ontario Privacy Commissioner Anne Kavukian says action needs to be taken.
I would go to great lengths if I was a commissioner to make it clear to everyone here in Ontario, for example, of the consequences of using WeChat, and that your information may be flowing out to third parties unknown, and it can come back to haunt you.
WeChat is available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. Apple told us that it had no comment on the study, and Google said it is looking into it, but didn't get back to us. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, today's Frontline Heroes. Stick around, we'll be right back. Before we get to today's Frontline Heroes, we want to share an emotional tribute by Toronto's top doctor. This morning, Dr. Eileen Davila took a moment to thank the staff at Toronto Public Health for their work during the pandemic.
They have been absolutely incredible, and I get sort of emotional about this, so I'm sorry. I was looking up definitions of what it is that constitutes heroism. What I found was that it talks about actions done in service of others in need, and it talks about integrity and courage and self-sacrifice and selflessness and determination. And I'm really sorry for getting emotional about this, but to my team at Toronto Public Health, thank you. I'll leave it at that. I'm going to wrap it up. You are heroes in every sense of the word. And for that, you have my undying gratitude. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I think I better stop.
Always nice when the boss recognizes you like that. Now, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues, a Toronto paramedic wants to say thank you to her partner. This is Francesca Arkley on the left and Heather Stiva. They're both with Toronto Paramedic Services. Now, in an email, Francesca told us, during these recent weeks, we have seen an increase in patients calling with anxiety due to the virus, and Heather has been a superstar reassuring patients and bringing down their stress levels. She's also a quick thinker and an excellent diagnostician in the field. She delivers high-quality care to our patients, and she keeps me sane during these crazy times. So, thank you for everything you are doing, Francesca and Heather. If you would like to share a story about your frontline heroes, send us a selfie-style video explaining why they are a hero to you. Tag us on Twitter or Instagram at CBC Toronto. Send us a message on Facebook or email us at torontotips@cbc.ca. Stargazers were treated to a special glow last night. A supermoon named Flower Moon graced our skies. Appearing opposite the sun, the supermoon received its name because the flowers grow so abundantly at this time of year. Coined by astrologer Richard Knoll, a supermoon is a full or new moon that is at its closest point to Earth. There have been already 3 of them this year in 2020. The flower moon will be the last one before April 2021 when a super pink moon is expected. If you missed the sighting last night, don't fret. NASA says the moon will continue to glow tonight until tomorrow morning. So get out and take a look tonight, Colette.
Yeah, and you know what, Dwight? We have the conditions for it because we have primarily some clear skies coming our way. So yes, as Dwight mentioned, it is the last one, the 4th one of 2020, but April next year, it'll be back. But tonight's your chance. It'll be a little cool. We've got those north to northwesterly winds that are blowing. Our temperature will be coming down a couple of degrees, but keep in mind we still have some daylight hours. The sun's not setting till 8:27 and it's up at almost 6:01 for us today. So we're getting quite a bit of daylight hours, quite a few of them in there at this point. All right. Now, overnight tonight, we are going to see those mostly clear skies. It is going to allow those temperatures to go down to freezing. In many areas close by, you're going to see -2, in fact. And that's why we do have that frost advisory. Hamilton, Niagara, stretching back towards Chatham, Kent, up to Sarnia, and points in between. OK. Now, tomorrow, we get into some of this much colder air that's in place. So what we're seeing for a daytime high on Friday is closer to where we should be for overnight lows, so 6 degrees. And as we get into the afternoon hours, we will see more clouds moving in, and along with those clouds, some scattered wet flurries coming through our skies as well. And that's really later in the day on Friday, and then we'll see some of that overnight, especially into cottage country, into Saturday morning, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has your next local news after the National at 11. We will see you back here tomorrow night at 6. Stay safe. Have a great night, everybody.